guys? Coach Justin with Inoue RYU BJJ, and I'm very excited about today's episode. I have Will Hagerty, Professor Will Hagerty at Jiu Jitsu Dynamics in Olympia, Washington. And Professor Will is a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I would highly recommend coming to check out his school if you live here locally or if you're traveling through the area. Great group of people, very technical style, and you'll get really good rolls in. So make sure to check them out if you're coming through Olympia, or check them out on social media on Instagram and all that stuff if you're into that. Thank you, brother. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you, and looking forward to what you have to show us. Do you want to say a little bit about your training background and what brought you to jiu-jitsu and your jiu-jitsu journey, as it were?
My training background, I'd say I started jiu-jitsu early 2000s, so 2000 to now, all the way through. Coming from high school wrestling, I wrestled very, very passionately during high school and wanted to pursue it further in college. Actually joined the Army, started jiu-jitsu, and just stayed with it ever since.
That was the big transition. So you were a grappler for a while, and then found jiu-jitsu and found your true love there. And you trained under some legends in the sport. So Barrett, Yoshida, and Egan Inoue, correct, in Hawaii.
Yes.
What was that like? And to kind of frame this out for those who might not know, training since the early 2000s. At that, and I started training in the late 90s, early 2000s myself. There was a time where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Vale Tudo, NHB, MMA were all kind of synonymous. Like it all was kind of, there wasn't a whole lot of cultural division like there is now. Jiu-Jitsu is kind of its own thing, MMA is kind of its own thing, I would contend. But back then, training was, I think, a little bit more rough and tumble. What was it like training with Barrett, Yoshida, Egan, Inoue back in the early 2000s?
I was amazing. Like training with both Egan and Barrett, it was amazing. It's definitely tough, environment where in today's culture is not necessarily the same. Where back then it was a kill or be killed type of environment, right? You come in, you get some bang, and
sure,
you learn from the previous rows, and you just keep practicing, keep grinding, and keep moving forward. So it was definitely a great experience. I always show homage to both Egan and Barrett as my instructors coming up, and what I am today.
Right. Yeah. When you trained MMA and you competed in MMA as well as jiu-jitsu, how long were you doing that for, the MMA portion of your career?
So let's see, I went straight. So back then, I guess the amateur scene wasn't as big, or if it was, we went straight to pro. So I fought my first pro fight in 2002, and unfortunately, being in the Army, it was tough to get like fights and just with training environments, if us for the Army leaving away or going to TDY or going to the field, where it was difficult to kind of schedule fights and stay on track. And, people pulled out for injuries or whatnot. You go into a training camp and in the end, not get a fight. So, I've done it since the beginning. I didn't fight. My first fight was 2002. Then maybe I've done some Army competitions where, you can consider that an amateur fight, but I did a large competition where there were multiple professional fighters within,
Got it.
And then I fought again, let's say 2009, I believe, 2009, somewhere around there.
It's been a while. Yeah. Do you feel like that sort of jaunt into MMA helped your jiu-jitsu in certain ways? And if so, like how would you see it elevating your jiu-jitsu game?
I think just the grind, it does. But the intent for me behind MMA was always jiu-jitsu. It was more of that next step. Was never part of the plan per se. It was, I got into jiu-jitsu, loved it, and training with Barrett every day. So he took me under his wing, and we trained every day, every night, and we do MMA. Back then we do our Vale Tudo or NHB whenever MMA wasn't a term.
Right.
And one day Egan pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to fight, if I ever thought about fighting. And my comment to him was, whenever you think I'm ready, right? And he's like, well, you're training with at the time, Barrett was, I think, number 2, number 3 or 4 in the world, because he was fighting Shudo in Japan.
Sure.
He's like, you're training with the top guy in the world every day. Any fight you take is not going to be that hard. So I got into it right after.
Awesome. So you didn't necessarily though have a striking background, and like you weren't a boxer, a Muay Thai kickboxer or something like that beforehand. So all your training was geared towards MMA and based off of your jiu-jitsu then, is that?
Correct. So we had and for me, like I'm goofy foot, and I would argue like, I'd say wrestling pushed a lot of that because of like leading with your right leg, and also like, even bodyboarding growing up in Hawaii, like I was always, like everything was goofy foot. So I had to train to fight that way, so I fight southpaw, but I'm right-handed.
Okay, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Well, then you competed in MMA, but you were also, and you've continued to compete at a high level in jiu-jitsu over the last 24 years. Mm-hmm. How important do you view competition relative to jiu-jitsu progress? You run an academy, so you have students, both for yourself and for them. Is competition something that's necessary, or is it just something that's helpful, or how do you view that fitting into somebody training jiu-jitsu?
It definitely helps, I think, with the growth. It's a way to test your skill and test yourself, your mind, mentally getting out there. Because the biggest challenge is like, it's really yourself. Like, can you get out there and get over the nerves, the fear? Practice what you do day in, day out, and put it to play when you're on the mat where it really counts. Let's see.
Do you think it's necessary? Like, does somebody have to compete?
I say no. Like today, you don't ever have to compete. I don't press it on my students. I always tell them, like, if you do it, I think it's great that you give it a shot and to test that test your ability and your skills. And if you want to get out there and compete, I don't push it. But if you choose to, I always say do it 2 times, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the first time you don't know what to expect. We go crazy. You end up like feeling like you're gonna die, but in the end you don't die, sure. Right? And then you realize that the second time when you do it, you actually know what to expect, and the experience is a lot better. And that's when they'll be able to gauge, like, is it something for me or not for me, and respect it either direction. I tell my guys, you never have to do it if you never choose to.
Got it. Well, downstream from that, if and I like to ask this question to everybody who comes onto the channel, I'm sure you encountered this a lot as an academy owner. If somebody's thinking about training or thinking about starting jiu-jitsu, or they're just starting training, and maybe they don't have any wrestling background or other sporting background, what would be your words of advice to that person? Because that, you both know, that beginning, that's super hard. It's hard on your ego. It's it's really difficult to sort of get acclimated to the environment. Sometimes there's a high attrition rate. Mm-hmm. So what words of encouragement or advice would you impart to somebody who's just starting?
Well, one, I would say if somebody is seeking to start, right, wanting to start, I would say take the leap and get out there. And the hardest part, I tell everybody, that we tell anybody that comes to our school for a trial or to kind of get into jiu-jitsu is stepping to the door is the hardest part, right? Making a phone call, sending emails, that's easy. People do it all the time. But going forward with that, coming through the door and stepping into a different environment is hard. And 2, do your homework, right? Check out the area, see the different cultures and atmospheres of different schools, and see what fits for what you're looking for. For the ones that are already in it and starting out, just stay the course, stay consistent. That's the key. Consistency is key, right? The mats, you hear that cliche that the mats don't lie, and that's I actually believe in that, right? You train in, how much work you put in really shows, and just listen to your instructor and try to take as much as you can in, and it seems like a lot, and in time it would start making sense.
No, I would 100% agree with that. And I'm sure you might have these conversations with people who again might be new to training, or they're thinking about starting, but I have heard this as a new school owner quite a few times, like, I really want to start that jiu-jitsu stuff, but I'm going to get in shape first, I'm going to start running and lifting. And what would you say to those, to that maybe that attitude or that mindset that, like, I got to get ready first and then I'll start on the mats? Yeah,
you get that often, and I think as a school owner, what you'll get that same type of mindset would be when somebody's hurt, when they get injured, right? They get injured, they get pushed off, and they feel that they need to recover to their old 100% to get back to training again. And in the end, sometimes they never make their way back into the school because they're never at that level again. Where I always tell my students that it's like, your current 100% is your 100%. You get hurt, you get injured, you know, if you're waiting to be where you were prior to that, that may never come. You know, we get older, our bodies take a toll, and I think you're always going to see that residual injury still lacking. So just come in and work around it. Never, like when you're training, just adapt the techniques, adapt what's going on with your body to keep it going. Yeah.
Well, that is the nice part about jiu-jitsu. I think you'd agree that, yeah, you can, unlike some sports, you can definitely adapt the game to whatever you're facing personally, or whatever limitations you're dealing with in that moment. That is, it's pretty versatile in that way.
And like kind of going with your question regarding to like training up or getting in shape to get in there, I think the subset of just training jiu-jitsu as a whole is you're going to get yourself in shape, right? Sure. You get out there, you're doing the line drills, drilling nonstop, getting in there, getting some rolls, staying after class for additional training. You're going to hit those actual tiers. You'll see a lot of athletes come through the door that maybe are runners or, you know, like do different sports, and they come in and it's like, wow, it's a lot harder than you thought. Because one, they're using a lot more energy than somebody that has experience. So that's just time will kind of get them on track.
Yeah. No, I think that is correct. Is there? Again, this is a question I get asked a lot. Is there anything besides rolling that helps with conditioning and rolling that you found? Go ahead.
No, I mean, for me, I just train, I roll. You know, back in the day when I used to compete I competed at adult division all the way till I was 36. So I skipped essentially Masters 1 and I moved to 2. But even when I was competing in adult, you know, I would run a lot just because the Army, we have to do a lot of conditioning daily and day out. But to match what we do in jiu-jitsu, I would say, you know, like CrossFit is something that definitely helps out. I used to do a lot of that back in the day. But as you get older, it's kind of, you know, it can still be easier in the body if you do it right, you know, less weight. But I would say for me, I do a lot of like any kind of workout that can simulate jiu-jitsu. So that high explosive type movements, you know, you know, maybe some burpees or some sprints, you know.
Sure. But really rolling is the thing.
Rolling is the key.
Yeah.
No more than that, just rolling. Training.
Right on. Well, and then as an adjunct to that first question about maybe somebody who's new to jiu-jitsu, somebody who's thinking about opening up an academy, so somebody who's been training for a number of years and, you know, there is a need in their community and they want to open up a school. Words of advice there. And I'm asking to somebody who's newer to opening up an academy, but so I'm definitely taking notes. But what have you found that way? You know, what's been good about it? What's been really hard about it?
It's, I mean, as you can see, you're in it now, like trying it. It's tough, you know. You just got to get out there and take the leap of faith, and do your homework. Kind of like same thing we talked about earlier, but just do your homework and talk to friends. Most people that want to open a school have some connection to other school owners, you know, other black belts. But it is tough, but it's something doable, you know. But it's not necessary for everybody, right? You know, opening a school. And another thing I tell people is, on an average student that, you know, knows black belts, you know, if you've been training for a while, like how many black belts do you know? And usually they know a lot, right? Sure. And out of that, all the black belts, you know, how many own schools is the next question. Sure.
Yeah. Not quite as many as there are in existence. No, for sure. Okay, no, that makes sense.
I would say the advice would be just to get out there, you know, like give it a shot, like reach out to other school owners and kind of ask for tips and, you know, tips of the trade to kind of help facilitate their goals. Yeah.
Was there any huge like pitfall or anything that you encountered or something that you were able to avoid? You're like, man, I'm sure glad I didn't do XYZ thing, or was it relatively smooth sailing?
I would say, you know, I guess a good tip that helped us to start small, right? You start small and kind of grow, where some people start big and try to grow into it, and you know, and that could be scary.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, investing a lot of money going into it, and in the end, we're waiting for that growth to come to the door. So if you start small, you can kind of grow and have a good problem to have where you need to find something bigger.
That makes sense. Well, then how challenging or easy have you found as far as how you structure your program here? So you're teaching classes 6 days a week. You're teaching both kids and adults. And to frame this out, I think it would be easier for most people to kind of wrap their head around if we had a codified structure to jiu-jitsu. It's like, you learn this lesson and then that lesson. There's these 32 moves that you memorize, and these are the benchmarks to get to blue belt or purple belt. That sort of systemic way of looking at things would make it easier. But the issue with jiu-jitsu is it's so vast and it's changing all the time. It's hard to put it into those nice little buckets. So do you run a curriculum here at your school that's set, or do you kind of free form it as far as your teaching? And
I would say set in a sense where we're going through there's a systematic approach on like how I like to teach techniques and move with it, where if you take what we're working today and you literally backtrack 2 years from now, everything ties together. So in that sense, yes, because I've taught those techniques so many times before, and when I'm doing it, I have those series that we'll cover within that. But it'll flow based off of like the way the students are progressing. If they're progressing well with the technique, then we can kind of move on a little faster. If they're not, then we can stay with it a little longer. And because I have fundamentals in all levels, where it like it's too different in a sense. Yeah. So where the fundamental classes are staying in that fundamental level, where you can still use that same principle or concept, where you can tailor, track it back.
Sure.
And in all levels where same thing, right? We did it for years, just constant.
Got it. Well, then, as somebody who's then responsible for ranking up your students, again, there's not much objective criteria most of the time. Unlike a lot of martial arts, where it's like, well, you learn these 3 kata, and then you test, and then you get your belt. In jiu-jitsu, it's a lot more amorphous. Like, it's kind of based on our discretion. So do you? I know there's a lot of white belts and blue belts out there, that are interested in that question. Like, what do I do to get better? So how do you judge that, being that everybody's individual goals are so different? What do you look for as an instructor to sort of as marks of progress?
Well, those are always, I would say, different. You're going to get different points of view, or very. It's a tough one, right? It's a very tough one. But I always tell people just the consistency. Going back to that again. Staying consistent, coming in, because the mats truly don't lie, and it's not about competing. I don't need you to compete to demonstrate the skill. I would say that does help, because it shows that one's putting themselves out there. They're learning it, they're getting it, they're at least trying to compete and test themselves. But staying consistent, just staying consistent and coming in, and in time, promotions will just come. Chase the technique, not necessarily the belt.
Yeah, that's valuable advice for sure. So I hope you're all taking notes at home. Like that's definitely a thing. I agree with you. Well, then, as far as what belts mean, black belt in particular, because I think that it shouldn't necessarily be viewed this way, maybe, but kind of as like the apex of achievement. People are looking to get that. In some ways, black belt to me means that it's a reflection of your ability to roll, right? A black belt should be able to roll with other black belts and do well or hold their own. Mm-hmm. But it also has to mean something outside of that, in the sense that, I think most of us, if we saw that John Danaher was going to have a match against Gordon Ryan, we anticipate that Gordon Ryan would probably win that match. However, that doesn't necessarily reflect that Gordon Ryan should be ranked higher in terms of his degrees of black belt over John Danaher. So there has to be something outside of just your ability to roll on the mat. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, or what your thoughts on what a black belt should mean.
It's a good one. Another good one. Let's see. Black belt should mean. I just shows the dedication, right? The commitment that you stuck with the art, and it depends. In today's time, I think people get black belts a little faster than they did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, you see a black belt back in the day, it would be a 10, 15, 20-year practitioner before they achieve that goal. But there are, many different levels to a black belt. Yeah. Not sure I'm hitting the question, but
no. I think that answers it. Or I guess maybe another way to put it would be, as age hits all of us, there's a certain, recognition that our level will probably be not what it is at 65, say, as it was at 35 if you're a black belt between all those years. But we don't demote anybody or take away their ranking necessarily. As,
right.
You know, saying like, well, you can't roll at that competitive level anymore, so you can't really be a black belt. There's kind of still a recognition of you have this time and grade and experience and that sort of thing. So,
right.
So yeah, other aspects that a black belt might bring beyond just your ability to roll.
Oh yeah, definitely. They have a lot to offer because they've been on the mats for so long. You know, the techniques, the growth in the art, you know, the common errors and things that they see, you know, in time. Like athletes are going to be able to perform techniques because they have the athleticism, they have the strength to kind of carry themselves through these movements. Where, you know, the older individual may have to rely more on technique than those athletic abilities.
Sure.
Right? So, it doesn't mean that you're a black belt only because you can roll, right?
Right.
I think it's just the time and commitment, you know, the experience, the knowledge that they bring to the art, you know, to the students.
Cool. Perfect. No, that ties it up nicely. Well, and then I was really interested in your perspective on this next question in terms of you're somebody who's been training for some length of time, and you've competed at high levels in Jiu Jitsu and you've competed in MMA, so you have a deep understanding of combat sports, but you've also been a member of the armed forces, and so there's perhaps, I guess a good way to put it would be a difference between combat sports training and training for combat. Those would be two different things. Relative to that, how important is self-defense oriented training in a jiu-jitsu school as opposed to like sport-specific training? You know, there's a place for like your jiu-jitsu shouldn't involve training with strikes or that sort of thing, as opposed to just training for sport, or should jiu-jitsu schools focus more on that sporting aspect? And
I think that's another great question that I think is very, I guess, subjective, where people you're gonna get different takes on it too.
Yeah.
But I think say one, it is a martial art, you know. So first and foremost, it's a martial art. So we're learning how to defend ourselves. And the sport aspect is the best way to test that in a real environment. But some people argue that, you know, like the sport competition side of jiu-jitsu won't necessarily translate to the self-defense side, where I beg to differ, where I think that, you know, although we only train sport, let's say any school that only trains sport, you take an individual that understands body control, dominant positions, just submissions, and just manipulation of just the mechanics of jiu-jitsu, are going to be able to defend themselves, you know, against the untrained or minimal trained opponent. But the self-defense side, I think, is important just to keep the roots alive, you know, like here in our school, I mix it up. So, you know, previously I used to do solely our fundamentals would be a self-defense structure.
Okay.
You know, and then with little sport, and then that's how we would do it until they get into like our intermediate and then our advanced or all levels. And today, now I kind of shifted where like self-defense relevant always with like strikes and different control points. But I do teach a lot more the sports side.
Got it.
But bottom line, I think it's a self-defense first. So knowing how to defend yourself and understanding what techniques would be relevant to a self-defense scenario versus it being and how to use it in a competition.
Sure. Yeah, no, I would agree with that, definitely. If you can pull it off in competition, you're reasonably apt to be able to pull it off in any scenario that comes your way. Very cool. Well, then you're an unaffiliated school, right? You have no direct affiliation with like any of the outlined organizations. Like there's Alliance, so there's Gracie Baja, there's wherever. But you are your own entity.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. So we opened up on ourselves again. Homage to my instructors. You know, Egan and Barrett Yoshida is who I always, you know, pay respect to. But as an official affiliation, correct, we run our own school. Yeah.
And that's been effective for you. Like that's
for the last 10 years. Yeah.
Right on. No, that's awesome. So then, being unaffiliated though, when you go to compete, you're your own entity, or how does that work with IBJJF and when you?
Yeah, we're a registered school under IBJJF as just Dynamics Washington. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to have that association. You can associate with schools or big affiliations, but for us, myself and my students, we register under just Dynamics.
Okay, got it. That makes sense. And then I don't think we got a good look at it earlier, but as far as your competition accolades and achievements, what what have you been able to do with your jiu-jitsu career? Like what, this is your time to brag, my friend.
I try to stay active. I do it. I like to say I do it for the students just to showcase that, staying up there, staying active, and competing, and just trying to lead from the front. What I teach, I try to compete in competition as well, very often and frequently. Accolade wise, let's see, notable ones, and in more recent years, I took Pan Am's in Master 3, 2022. The last 2 years I've took third place at Master World. So so this week we leave for Master Worlds again.
Best of luck, man. No, that's I look forward to hearing about your success. Well, then I also wanted to ask about gi versus no gi training and your opinion on that. I guess how much time you guys spend on no gi training versus gi, and do you think there's benefit to doing both?
Oh, definitely. We teach one day. I have one class a week that I teach no gi. We used to do 2, and then after reshifting the schedule, we're down to 1, and eventually maybe we'll pick that back up to 2 in the future if the demand is there. But I think it's very beneficial to the growth. They have. One can argue in both aspects that they're more superior to the other. I think they're equal, right? We have to understand how to take the gi off and still use our tools to our advantage without having grips, and vice versa. If you have no grips to grab, or if you're a no gi person and you put the gi on, how do you adapt to not being able to slip out of positions, having more friction, So you have to adjust the points of control, but I think they both go hand in hand. I think it's beneficial to learn both.
Right on. What do you like to do personally? What do you, at this point, what's your preferred?
I would say gi for me, 100%. I came up actually starting with Barrett and Egan, starting no gi until I got into the gi. So I did a lot of no gi in the past. But the gi for me is it's different. It's I think no matter what you're doing, gi or no gi, it's gonna be addicting.
Yeah, for sure.
But with the gi, there's just so much more techniques that I love to do. With the lapels and just grabbing the grips. It changes. Where in the no gi, we can slip out of positions. And then you can use that to your advantage. And understanding how to control somebody so they don't slip out. That's where the differences are. But they're the same.
Yeah. I agree with that. Well, okay. Then one last question. This is on a personal note, You grew up training with some of the legends in the sport, and I started training because I saw Royce Gracie in the UFC, and so I can definitely understand, as someone who trains, being a fan of the professional sport aspect of what we do. Mm-hmm. As that's changed, I guess because obviously the people that were competing 20 years ago are not actively competing at the apex of the sport now. But how much, as a black belt, as an instructor, as somebody who's competed, how much do you watch professional jiu-jitsu as a fan? Whether it's CGI or ADCC, I find myself kind of peripherally aware, but I'm not necessarily watching every event. So I'm curious, talking to other people who've been training for a while.
Oh, I study jiu-jitsu daily, so I keep up with as much as I can. Just keeping up with some of the different organizations. Just so many now, right, to follow. So, but just to stay up with it. But I'm not on Flow, for instance, on whatever event that's they're highlighting. But I do try to keep up with all the best guys, top guys, kind of stay sharp in the game. I follow all Barrett's talking about competing for back then to this day. He competes, somebody I strive to continuously, do. But he competes very actively. Just won the ADCC Open just this past weekend.
Yeah. So, all right. Well,
still does his. No. It's just that's. But you're absolutely right. There's not a lot of people that still actively compete that were training back in the day.
Sure.
They'll train heavy, they'll compete heavy, and then they'll start either transitioning to maybe becoming a school owner or an instructor and kind of veer away from it. Maybe come back in the master scene for a tournament or two, or just kind of steer away from it. But yeah, you're absolutely right. A lot of guys are still competing back then, but highlighting Barrett does, and that's something that I strive to continuously do. Yeah.
Well, and so longevity in the sport. Are there any keys to that as far as you've been training for a long time and training consistently? what do you do to stay healthy, or just to continue to stay active and not break your body in the process?
Just keep training now. It's a tough one too, because like, we beat ourselves up day in, day out doing the sport, but I would say that the more experience, hopefully one can understand the points of control to kind of keep yourself safe, know your body, know the type of techniques that you can do still and preserve yourself, for instance, because we're all hurt, right? We deal with the injuries and we figure them out, and we just understand how to keep ourselves safe. But like how I teach techniques and the way I've come up learning them in the past, 20 something years, 24 years, where it's not the same, where I do a lot of rim bowls and a lot of inversions, but back, 15 years ago, it was like playing on my neck, for instance, where like now the emphasis is avoiding your neck, right? Going from one shoulder to the next, and then minimizing how much pressure you're putting on your spine. So that's just one side or one aspect to it.
Fine tuning that technique.
Staying safe, just understanding. Again, I can't harp points of control. If I can control my opponent and not have them pass that barrier, that threshold where it forces you to use more strength or more movement, unnecessary movement, that where the risks can occur. If we can control the scenario, then we can kind of control where our body moves and where we preserve our body.
Got it. Words of wisdom.
Sometimes you can't help it though, right? That's just a combat sport. We can't. Somebody can, jump up high and get over your legs, or they can, just roll you in a direction where we can't control it. But I like to think and hope that you identify, you've been doing it long enough where we can identify how to, where the dangers lie, right?
Sure.
Where you're vulnerable, where they can take you in the wrong direction. And kind of mitigate those scenarios.
Where things start to go sideways, you can anticipate that and adjust accordingly.
And I try to teach that to my students, where, like the common things that you're going to see, or where the risk lies of potential injury, so identifying that early and showing what tends to happen, we can kind of stop that early on,
Do you put any mechanisms in place during class? Because I see this as a challenge too as an instructor. You have people of all different ages and sizes and athletic abilities, and now it's time to roll. And so you have your 250-pound, former college wrestler, and then you have your, 37-year-old soccer mom, and how do you get these people to roll without hurting each other? Do you put anything in place as far as like safety mechanisms or whatnot to prevent people getting hurt, or is that that sort itself out? Yeah,
so what I do, my practice now, and it's changed over the years, but back in the day, I would say during class, it was a 90+ minute class. It was instruction, like your standard warm up, your technique, your focus, and then rolls. Rolling for a class was a solid like a half an hour plus, of training. And that is where, everybody's training with whoever they want to, and it's hard because, like you said, you got somebody big, athletic, training. They don't know their strength yet, don't know the art as much, and they're trying to use their attributes to win the match.
Sure.
They could be going with somebody smaller, older, not as fit or athletic, where it's dangerous. So, back then, I'm always around trying to coach and slow things up. Yeah. Today, how I do it, where basically who you train with, essentially, you don't have to, but it just worked that way. I only do minimal rolling for a class, but every class, there's additional training, extra training. So I keep the mats open for another hour or so for extra training, but per class in itself is your standard hour of your warm-ups, instruction, and focus, and then we go into, I call it like your practice application, you're rolling.
Yeah.
And it's at your ability. So if you're injured and you're babying it, but generally you're rolling with the partner you train with. So in theory, they're about your size, your skill level, right? Or if you're taking somebody under your wing because they're new, so you're understanding and controlling that scenario. So very minimal rounds. So I would say 3 2-minute rounds just to get your body moving. It's a practice application time for myself to evaluate the students, help critique, and give them ability to kind of get that movement. For those that want to train further, the mats are always available for home.
That's awesome.
So,
I haven't heard of anybody else doing that. That's really, really cool.
It works, and it allows, it's kind of twofold. It lets the one, like people that have to leave because school, work, kids, where before, when it was a 90-minute class, it was almost, they felt obligated to stay for the whole duration until we bowed out, where now people leave, and as time progresses, they start sticking around because they're more comfortable rolling.
Sure.
But they can do the 2-3 minute rounds, for however long they see fit until they can get in with everybody else.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool, man. Like that's blowing my mind a little bit. That's okay. So
it's short and it's enough, and it's like some might say, man, 2 minutes, that's nothing. It is, but for the ones that don't train on a regular, it's a lot.
Sure.
Everybody's sweating. They all got a good roll in. And the ones that want to challenge themselves, they can during that 2 minutes. And in the end, the mats are always open the following, and they can train with whoever they want after that.
So almost like a mini open mat for your students specifically.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
And it's been working. Yeah, it works out.
Yeah.
No complaints.
That was something you developed on your own? Was that?
It actually happened indirectly, and I liked it, so I stayed with it. The indirect approach to it was COVID, right? After COVID, when we had to wear a mask and play the game, like challenging drilling with the mask on is very challenging. Right?
Sure.
So when we would roll, instead of having that half-hour plus rolling session like we used to, I had to make a change. So it was like 2-3 minute rounds, with a mask on, and you just do your thing. We're doing our part.
Yeah.
And then in the end, when we started veering away from it, and the mask came off, it was something to me that I felt it worked. So I kept it.
Wow, that's very, very cool. I like it. I like it, man. Well, all right, so good stuff. I'm really looking forward to the technique you're going to show us, brother. I really appreciate you.
Oh, man, thank you.
Thank you so much.